This video is brought to you by Captivating History. Seth Bullock was one of the greatest heroes of the American West, but he didn't start out that way. In fact, he wasn't born in America at all. Many of us have dreamed of living in the old American West, where outlaws walk the streets and you can settle a conflict with an old-fashioned shootout at high noon. There were cowboys and horses, gold in the hills, and sheriffs who were as tough as the land around them. These stories capture much of the spirit and wonder of the Wild West, but it doesn't capture some of the grittier elements, like murder being a regular part of life. The men who first settled the West didn't have much reliance on the law, and if it weren't for men like Seth Bullock, it's hard to say if law would ever have settled easily into that wild country. He was born on July 23, 1849, in Amherstburg, Canada West, which is modern-day Ontario. His father was Sergeant Major George Bullock, and although his power and fierce temper had made him a military hero, it also made him a terror at home, especially after Seth's mom died. Seth and his siblings lived in fear of their abusive father, and Seth tried to run away several times, each time unsuccessfully because of the harsh Canadian wilderness. Although his childhood was awful, Seth quickly cultivated a distaste for violence and a strong sense of justice, both of which would serve him well in adulthood. In 1860, Seth and his siblings suddenly found themselves alone in the world. Sergeant Major Bullock had been the county treasurer and had apparently taken advantage of his easy access to money. When caught, he fled to the United States, leaving his 8 children alone in the world. Seth was only 11. When he was 14, he finally got the opportunity to make something of his life. His older sister was moving to Montana, and Seth decided to go with her. It was the first time he had seen the American West, and although it was a harsh landscape, Seth immediately fell in love. Now, Seth's love for the West was different from many other pioneers his age. While other young men loved the West for the riches it could give them through gold, timber, and land, Seth loved nature for its own value, and he did not want it to be destroyed for the sake of money. Still, Seth did not immediately start off on his campaign. He settled into life in Montana, working as a successful auctioneer and volunteer firefighter. He was even elected to the Montana Territorial Senate, where he used his influence and love of nature to found Yellowstone National Park, the first and oldest national park in the world today. Seth found that the political life suited him, and even though his term as senator ended in 1872, he decided to continue to act as a true leader of the community whenever possible. In 1873, he was elected sheriff of Lewis and Clark County, which included Helena and the surrounding mining towns. Helena had already been civilized, but the mining towns were filled with the roughest, most desperate people you could find. The American West was not always kind to the pioneers, and some of the unlucky ones turned to violence. Traditionally, many Western sheriffs met this violence with violence, but Seth Bullock had long decided he was not interested in that. Still, he believed strongly in justice, and long before the cry for nonviolence and accountability rang through the system, Seth was looking for a way to uphold the law while also treating people humanely. It can be a difficult line to walk, and Seth's first test was a Western outlaw named Clell Watson. Watson had stolen a horse. Seth and Watson exchanged gunfire because Seth had no problem defending himself, even though he refused to start fights, and Watson was arrested and sentenced to hang. The local population was very upset, and they tried to stop the public execution. They even chased off the executioner. But before Watson could go free, Seth chased off the crowd without firing a shot and finished the hanging, proving that he would continue to uphold justice and the law despite any possible threats to his own life. He continued as sheriff of Lewis and Clark County until 1875. During that time, Seth even married and started a family. But his story does not end in the beautiful wilds of Montana. Even though he was a successful community leader, Seth still had his auction business, and he was continually looking for ways to expand as an entrepreneur. He teamed up with Solomon Starr, and together they started a hardware store in Montana, because everyone eventually needs hardware. When they heard that there was a booming town in South Dakota that didn't have one, they decided to move and make their money selling hardware to a town that would eventually realize they needed it. Seth Bullock was going to Deadwood. Now, Deadwood isn't the most famous city in America. Few people have ever even heard of it. Deadwood was founded as a mining town near the Black Hills of South Dakota. This was the home of the Lakota people, and they viewed the hills as sacred. The Lakota people loved their home because it was rich in buffalo and other natural resources they needed. The miners loved the Black Hills because they were filled with gold. The two groups fought fiercely over the land, each believing that they had the right to its natural resources. Deadwood moved from a camp to a town around 1875, when John B. Pearson discovered a great quantity of gold at the bottom of a ravine that he called Deadwood Gulch. The other miners quickly flocked to it, and their success brought other men who were hungry to make their wealth in the Black Hills. Greed was part of the town's inception, and the crime rate was shockingly high. For the first year, there was at least one murder every day. Not surprisingly, no families lived in Deadwood, so most of the women there had been brought in as prostitutes for the miners. The town became even more dangerous when Al Swearingen moved in. He realized that he didn't have to mine for gold to make his money. Instead, he set up a dance hall and a saloon for the miners to come to blow off steam, with as much alcohol and women as they wanted. Deadwood became increasingly violent and lawless, helped along because no one was willing to stand up for justice. When Seth Bullock and Solomon Starr arrived, they weren't looking to bring justice to the West. They were looking to set up shop, and they started their first night by auctioning chamber pots to the highest bidders, because the young miners who had thought to bring gold pans and alcohol had forgotten about basic hygiene. Although their first night showed them the fortune they could make in Deadwood, they soon realized the extent of the town's lawlessness. 2 days before they arrived, Wild Bill, one of the legendary sheriffs and gunslingers of the West, had tried his hand at gambling in the Deadwood saloon. He did not leave that saloon alive. A young man named Jack McCall shot Wild Bill in the back of the head, but the camp court found him not guilty. Of course, he was recaptured and tried by a real court later, but his first acquittal sent shockwaves through the county. In 1877, Seth was working hard to prove that you could make money in Deadwood without resorting to illegal activities, and he was asked by Governor John Pennington of the Dakota Territories if he would serve as Deadwood's appointed sheriff temporarily. Seth accepted and quickly began to establish law and order in this unruly miner town. In about 9 months, Seth had turned the town around, taming its wild people into compliance with most of the laws and uprooting crime. And he did it all without shootouts, murders, or any other extreme actions other Western sheriffs were using at the time in the name of justice. The only person that Seth was never able to stop was Al Swearingen. In addition to his saloon and dance hall, Al built the Gem Variety Theater. Although it masqueraded as a respectable place for entertainment, it actually was a not-so-secret cover for his prostitution business. He treated the women there shamefully, but Seth could never drive Al out of town, most likely because he didn't have the power or resources to match Al's wealth. Al Swearingen eventually left Deadwood in 1904 and moved to Denver, Colorado, where he was struck down in the streets. Other than the issues with Al, Seth Bullock was able to reform Deadwood in only 9 months. By the time the next sheriff was elected, the town was safe enough that Seth's wife and daughter joined him, and he could once again devote his time and attention to his hardware store. By 1881, Seth and Solomon bought land and started a successful ranch. They fed the cows with alfalfa they grew on the ranch, the first in South Dakota to do so. In 1890, they got another chance to improve their business fortunes. The Fremont, Elkhorn, and Missouri Valley Railroad was looking to expand into South Dakota, and the two men offered to allow the railroad to build on part of the ranch free of charge with one caveat: the station had to be on the ranch. Free land is enough to get most people's attention, and the railroad accepted. The two business partners then began to offer the same free land to any business that would build near the station. Suddenly, they had enough businesses to call themselves a town, and they named it Belle Fourche. Business was expanding in Deadwood too. After their hardware store burned down, Seth and Solomon built the Bullock Hotel, a tasteful and elegant rival to the Gem Variety Theater. The Bullock Hotel was Seth's pride and joy, and it was filled with elegant charm that you can still visit today in Deadwood, South Dakota. He loved serving his customers and dazzling them with the luxuries that were more typical of the East than the harsh Wild West. Of course, business and protecting the law weren't Seth's only interests. He was also interested in making friends, just like we are today. While running his ranch, Seth met Theodore Roosevelt, who bought a ranch nearby in 1884. Roosevelt lived around Deadwood for 2 years before selling his ranch again, and during that time, he and Seth cemented a lifelong friendship. It started with joining together to hunt down a horse thief known as Crazy Steve, and it continued all the way through Roosevelt's impressive political career. They served together in the Spanish-American War, even if Seth never saw any action, and when Roosevelt became president in 1901, he remembered his steely-eyed friend from way back in South Dakota. He first named him the forest supervisor of the reserve on the Black Hills, and then, in 1905, he appointed him to be a U.S. Marshal, a role in which Seth proudly served in South Dakota until 1914. This was the height of Seth's political career, but his work on the western frontier has rung true in the pages of time. Seth Bullock died quietly in his bed of colon cancer on September 23, 1919, and he left behind a legacy that the Wild West desperately needed: a love of justice tempered with honesty and integrity in the face of human depravity and violence. He was able to do what other sheriffs couldn't even dream of: tame the Wild West without losing himself or his town along the way. To learn more about Seth Bullock, check out our book, Seth Bullock, A Captivating Guide to Deadwood's First Sheriff Who Tamed This Wild West Town and Was Later Appointed U.S. Marshal by Theodore Roosevelt. It's available as an ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Also, grab your free mythology bundle ebook while it's still available. All links are in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more videos like this.